I am long overdue for an update on Low, my dungeon crawl board game. I was hoping to do an update once a month this year, and here we are in April, and this is only my second update. I spent all of January on a diversion learning how to paint gouache. And then in February, my father-in-law passed away, and been kind of dealing with real world stuff since then. But I'm finally carving out some time to get back to development on the board game. In my last video, I mentioned that I might switch to a card-based design, which probably seems completely insane to half the people that have been following the development of this game over the last couple of years. But surprisingly, I got some positive feedback on that idea. I think some people really get why I need to make that change, and they've had similar experiences with their own game designs and also with games that they play. Card-based design is just a more modern, more modular, more streamlined approach. Switching from counters to cards might create a couple problems, but it's actually going to solve a dozen problems. So I kind of have to pick and choose at this point. So I've been playing around a lot with card design, and none of this stuff should be taken literally. This is just me hacking away, trying to figure out different card sizes and the font sizes that work best for those kinds of cards. I've been playing around with poker sized cards. I've been playing around with mini cards, trying to figure out like if everything can fit on mini cards, or if some card types should be poker and some card types should be mini. Obviously, the mini cards are going to be a lot cheaper, and I can fit twice as many of them in the same volume of space. So if I can get away with mini cards, that would be awesome. But I think some particular card types are going to need more information than will fit on mini cards. And so I'm still just trying to get all that ironed out. At the end of the day, I think maybe all items could go on mini cards. So I think these power items could be mini cards. I think ingredients, I think standard weapons. I think all of those could be on minis, really. Um, but then maybe all of the quest cards, the discovery cards, will be poker sized, because I would love to be able to fit all of the rules for each quest on these cards. And I don't know if that's possible. So right now I'm really just prototyping how the information fits on the cards, how much information can fit on a card, and how small I can make the illustrations and still make them visually appealing. How small can I make the fonts before they're just obnoxious? There's a lot of little design issues that I need to figure out. So what I did was I spent a lot of time just studying all the cards for games that I own. So this is an example of the item cards for Runebound 3rd edition. These are item cards and weapons for Descent 2nd edition. These are item cards for Sword and Sorcery. And here we have cards for Eldritch Horror, the board game. Here's the 1-inch counters for Back a Dungeon. So then I just try to get this narrowed down to like, well, which of these works best? I think some of these 3D flourishes on the Sword and Sorcery board game kind of bother me. I don't really like the bevels. I find them distracting. I think the images on these Runebound item cards are just too small. Really tiny, not crazy about that. I like the landscape aspect ratio and the size of the images on these Descent 2nd edition cards. I think they work pretty well. And then I think these Eldritch Horror item cards look really good. I like the highly rendered nature of these, and they just really pop. And also, these cards have the most space for text. All the chrome on these cards really limits how much text you can fit on them. And I like how they just really open it up. These cards are just a lot cleaner, a lot less chrome, but I think they're more thematic and visually interesting, personally. And then these are just like too gaudy. I think Sword and Sorcery might be my favorite game out of all of these, but my least favorite card design. These cards are consistent. They're highly thematic. They're easy to read except for the weird color scheme issues. I do like how they present on these poker size cards. Obviously, I'm gonna crank up the design knobs on all this stuff. There needs to be more texture. The images themselves need to be full color, but I wanna stick with the same style that I've been using for the map tiles and the monster cards. So it's gonna be that same kind of heavy pen and ink style with Photoshop colors. This design will match all the existing assets that I'm not ditching. This is from Deckbox Dungeon, I think. These are extremely simple. They're a little Photoshoppy for my taste, but I do think they're very easy to read. They convey all the information very cleanly, and I do really appreciate that. I like how the artwork is the most important thing on the card, so that's pretty cool. But these cards need to convey a lot less information than my cards need to convey. Dungeons and Dragons adventure board games. I really like these games, surprisingly, but I really hate the graphic design on these games. On the upside, these are very, very easy to read, but on the downside, these are probably the most boring dungeon crawl board game cards that I've ever seen in my life. Let's see, Arkham Horror, the card game. I always thought that the cards that come with this game are beautiful, and with this poker size cards, once again, you can devote a lot of real estate to the artwork, which is always a plus, I think. These cards probably have a little more chrome than I would want. This is from a new game that I purchased, Earthborn Rangers, and I think these cards are pretty. I really like how much real estate they give to the artwork. I think that's great. Some of the little chrome elements on these cards I find a little obnoxious, but I think they were just trying to go for this cross between like naturalistic and cyber world. I see why they did what they did with it. All in all, I think these cards are pretty easy to read, and I think they're attractive. So yeah, for the last few days that I've finally had time to get back into my game design, I'm really just trying to crack the card design code and figure out, how this is all going to work in my game. There are going to need to be some counters in the game, but I'm really trying to get it down to either one sheet of half-inch counters, which would be 28 half-inch counters, or two sheets of 3/4-inch counters, and that would be 30 3/4-inch counters. I personally think that half-inch counters are just too small, but I'm going to prototype a sheet of those and see how they feel. My guess is I'm going to end up going with two sheets of the 3/4-inch counters. But at the very least, I need the avatars for the 4 heroes. I need their vital stat tracker counters. And then I'm going to need some sort of paired tokens so that entities on the board can be paired with cards, abstracting the monsters on the board and pairing them with monster cards that are off the map is going to make the game exponentially more expandable, because I can release entire monster expansions that are just decks of cards now. Consider doing all vital stat tracking on the adventure record, but I have to just figure out where to draw the line with abstracting some of these board game elements. But right now, you've got the adventure record, but then on the back, you can track the progress of each hero. This could potentially replace the stat trackers altogether, and it would also save the need for 12 counters. Updating stats on an adventure record is going to be fine for some gamers, and it's going to turn others off. These are all big decisions that I'm going to have to make, and it's not going to be fun. I think it's going to be somewhat divisive. Right now, to release, let's say, the Wilderness expansion or the City expansion, I'm going to have to release many slugs of monster counters. There's a lot of overhead that comes with expanding the game, but if I go with a more abstract approach for tracking the position of monsters on the map, then I could see expansions like the Wilderness expansion literally just being a deck of poker-sized cards that just has all the quest cards on it. And then I think the monster cards are also going to be poker-sized, because I'm kind of revamping how those work. So item expansions could just be like a nice fat deck of minis, And a quest expansion could just be a nice, simple, clean deck of quest cards, monster cards. So I think my next goal is to finish converting all of the counters to cards. And I'm not going to worry too much about aesthetics or graphic design. And I'm just going to print them on cheap paper. And then I'm going to play the game. So I'm going to try to get all this done in the next few days. And then I'm gonna do a bunch of play testing before I get carried away with the design and make sure that I even like this card-based approach. Because once I get into it, I may discover all kinds of issues. I may decide that I hate it and I may just go back to counters and be done with it. This update does not need to take months and months, although it could. I'm really hoping it's more like weeks, barring any more family drama or family tragedy. You know, my protocol since the beginning has been to just expose every aspect of the development of this board game. I'm hopeful that my updates will be more consistent moving forward, but we'll see.